Good morning and welcome to Easter Sunday at the Unitarian Universalist congregation at Shelter Rock. What a bright and cheerful group we look to be this morning. Particularly surprising for those who came to the 6:30 sunrise service. Some of them went home and slept between. Some of them stayed here and slept between. If you notice that your neighbor is falling asleep during the service, you can count on them having been at the sunrise service this morning. So, we are delighted to have you here. I'm the Reverend Ned White, the interim senior minister here in the congregation, serving with the Reverend Natalie Fenimore, the Reverend Jennifer Brower, and Nancy Reid-McKee, who is our ministerial intern. We invite you, those of you who are here, to join us for UU Cafe immediately after the service, and you will be able, if you are a first-time visitor, to get a free meal ticket at the visitor desk out in the lobby. So if that's your situation, please stop by there to get that voucher. Today, let me ask the children, do you know what's happening immediately after the service here? Yeah, Easter egg hunt. Everybody knows that, but a few of them are bold enough to say that. Now, I will be giving some instructions later in the service about the order in which children of various ages and their parents can leave the worship room. So keep your ears open for that later in the service. In your orders of service, you will find some announcements about some programs that we want to bring to your attention. There is a climate ribbon project, and there are ribbons in the lobby where we ask you to write what do you love and hope to never lose to climate change and hang your ribbon on the tree. So you can do that in the lobby while you're waiting for the Easter egg hunt. There is a program on the Platinum Rule that we're going to reference briefly in the service, but a more detailed program on Friday that the women's group is offering. There's a climate justice program on Saturday with the same presenter as presenting on Friday, and there is lunch with Kathleen McTeague from the UU College of Social Justice, an experiential learning program, which is also a Veach grantee that will be here next Saturday. Reverend McTeague will be preaching about the work of the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, another Veach grantee, here next Sunday. And I direct your attention to other announcements in the order of service. Today is a special day in a number of ways, so let me turn the podium over to Nancy Reid-McKee, who will tell you a little bit about what's special today. Nancy.
Excuse me. So, 3 people died, and they're at the pearly gates of heaven. St. Peter looks at the 3 of them and says that before they can enter the gates, they have to answer one simple question. What is Easter? Oh, that's easy, the first person replies. That's the holiday to celebrate the Israelites' freedom from Egypt, and that's when we eat the unleavened bread. Wrong, cries St. Peter, and proceeds to the second person with the same question. What is Easter? The second replies, Easter is that holiday where we play tricks on everybody and we do silly gags. St. Peter looks at the second person and shakes his head in disgust. Then, peering over his glasses, he looks at the third person. Well, what do you think Easter is? The third person smiles confidently and looks at St. Peter in the eye, and he says, I know what Easter is. It's the Christian holiday that coincides with the Jewish celebration of Passover. Jesus and his disciples ate the Last Supper, their Passover meal, together. But the next morning, the Romans crucified him, stabbed him in the side, and by the end of the day, he was placed in the tomb that was sealed with a large boulder. St. Peter smiled in delight as the person continued on to say, The next day, the boulder was rolled away, and Jesus came out, but he could not see his shadow, so we all know there will be 6 more weeks of winter. This time of year can be confusing. Like Christmas, there are a lot of different religious traditions that are honored in the same time period. Passover is in close proximity to Easter, since the infamous Last Supper of Jesus and the disciples was the Passover meal. This is also the time of the vernal equinox, when the long, dark nights of winter have gradually been getting shorter until the hours of daylight are equal to the hours of nighttime. This is a time for pagan celebrations of new life, fertility, and waking of our spirits for a time of growth. Easter eggs and rabbits and the name Easter all come from the pagan rituals that have melded into this holiday. During our service today, we will honor Easter, that for many Christians is the most important of all days, because the death and resurrection of Jesus are the foundation for their faith in God's forgiveness. We recognize Passover, celebrating the liberation of the Israelites from the Egyptian captivity. And finally, for the Unitarian Universalist congregation at Shelter Rock, we continue to focus attention on our first principle of worth and dignity for all. And this month we pay particular attention to learning about both the golden and the platinum rules, and you will be hearing more about those during the service today.
And now, as is our custom, I invite you to warmly greet one another and welcome them to this congregation.
the words of E.E. Cummings. I thank you, God, for most this amazing day, for leaping greenly spirits of trees and a blue true dream of sky, and for everything which is natural, which is infinite, which is yes. I who have died am alive again today, and this is the Son's birthday. This is the birthday of life and of love and wings, and of the gay, great, happening, illimitably earth. How should tasting, touching, seeing, hearing, breathing, any lifted from the no of all nothing, human merely being, doubt, unimaginable you? Now the ears of my ears are awake, and the eyes of my eyes are opened.
I invite the Ambrose family, Allison, Dan, Lucy, and Penelope, to come forward for the lighting of our chalice, and we will say together the words from the Passover Hagaddah that are printed in your order of service. May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our powers to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse, to serve you, Spirit of freedom. Thank you. And now let us join together in our words of aspiration and invite you to, affirmation rather. They are also aspirational. I want to make that clear too. As we know very well in our congregation, all of our ideals are aspirational. And I invite you, as you are able and willing, to stand as we say these words together, and then remain standing for our song of affirmation. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. Quest of the truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve human need. This to reaffirm and covenant with each other. Please be seated.
We will now explore the Passover story, and I'd like you to join me in the responsive reading in the great hymnal number 631. You will read the part that is in italics. What sacrifices would you make for freedom today? How far would you go? How deeply would we work and look within ourselves? Yet we, who have that time, what do we do to be worthy of our precious inheritance? How easy it is for us to relive the days of our bondage as we sit in the warmth and comfort of our Seder. Please stand in body or spirit as you're willing and able to sing hymn number 220 in the great hymnal. Bring out the festal bread. seated. The story of Passover sits in the middle of a longer passage in the Hebrew Bible, the book we know as the book of Exodus. This story is called an identity narrative. That is, it's a story that tells how people come to understand themselves. An identity narrative talks about who you are as an individual, who you are as part of a people. And the Passover story is one of the core stories that establishes the identity of the Jewish people. It explains who they are, how they came to be. The Passover story says that Joseph brought his family, the descendants of Abraham and Sarah, to Egypt during a plague. While they were in Egypt, these Jewish immigrants came to be seen as a threat, and they were enslaved by the Egyptians for many generations. The Jews, during this time of enslavement and suffering, prayed to their God who was different from the gods worshipped by the Egyptians. And their God empowered a man, one man, Moses, to lead them out of Egypt and into freedom. Now, convincing the king, the Pharaoh, like any king, convincing them to let the Jewish people go, to let enslaved people go, was not easy. Moses and his God made the Egyptians suffer from plagues so that they might see that they were wrong to keep people in bondage. Water turns to blood. Frogs invade the land. There is a plague of biting insects. Boils infest people and animals. There's fiery hail from the sky. Hordes of locusts attack the fields, destroying the crops. There is darkness, even in the middle of the day. The earth itself rises up against slavery and cries out against the injury to human worth and dignity. Slavery is incompatible with our interdependent world. And the last plague, the 10th, was a profoundly terrible thing. There was to be death all over Egypt. And only those who followed Moses' instructions and placed the blood of a sacrificed lamb over their doorways would have death pass over them. This is the Passover that is remembered. The new life of freedom for those who escaped slavery and death is remembered. And each year, for many centuries now, the Jewish people are directed to honor Passover with a remembrance ritual, the Seder. To tell the story, to act out the story, to consume the story and incorporate it into your very body, to become the living story, to be nourished by the lessons of the ancient time, the lessons that we are connected to suffering and to all who suffer, that we must not give up the struggle to be free, even when that freedom is costly and even if it takes a long time, because the reward of freedom is great and worthy of our struggle. All should live in the wonder and awe of being liberated. Many Unitarian Universalists may not believe in the factual or historical story found in the Exodus. Many may reject a God who causes plagues and suffering, even to free others. Many may reject the very idea of waiting for any God or any one man to liberate us. What we do find in this story, the Passover story, what I believe keeps this story alive for people across time, not only Jewish people, but people of all faiths, people of no religion. The truth that I find at the core of this story is the connection between human liberation and human identity. The Passover story says that we human beings were made for freedom. Liberated lives were and are the intention for us. Our God and our own human agency are meant to lead us to liberation. We must dream and struggle our way to becoming liberated people. This is a creation narrative that includes the particular experience of the ancient Jewish people in the Exodus story, but which has come to include the experience of all enslaved people yearning to be free. And this narrative of freedom has come to include all of us. Our Unitarian ancestor, Henry David Thoreau, writes, "Though I do not believe that a plant will spring up where there has been no seed, I have great faith in seeds. Convince me that you have a seed, and I am prepared to expect wonders." Passover is an invitation to plant a seed within ourselves, a seed of freedom, a seed of liberation, a seed of compassion for all those suffering, a seed of respect for the worth and dignity of all people. May it be so.
We begin our reflection on Easter with the words of Langston Hughes. In the time of silver rain, the earth puts forth new life again. Green grasses grow and flowers lift their heads. And over all the plain the wonder spreads of life, of life, of life. In time of silver rain, the butterflies lift silken wings to catch a rainbow cry, and trees put forth new leaves to sing in joy beneath the sky, when spring and life are new. Would you please rise as you're comfortable and join in singing hymn number 269, Lo, the Day of Days is Here. In the Presbyterian congregation in which I was raised, Easter Sunday was big and bright and joyful. The sanctuary, which often seemed so dim, seemed just lit up like a firefly, and there were flowers everywhere. The sanctuary was crowded with people of all ages, and everyone looked like they were dressed for a party. The people were happy, the music was cheerful, and the message was very clearly one of great celebration. I loved Easter Sunday. On Easter Sunday, people of the Christian faith gathered joyfully to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus. The word resurrection means to return to life after being dead. And on this holiday, this holy day, Christians celebrate Jesus' return to life after his death. According to the Christian Bible, Jesus was a Jewish man born more than 2,000 years ago. It said that he was a carpenter like his dad. When he was about 30 years of age, he took up a traveling ministry and began preaching and teaching to people in the towns near the Sea of Galilee, north of Jerusalem. Though there's a great deal we could say about Jesus' preaching and teaching, the central message of his ministry was one of love. Big love, radical love, a love that no one else had talked about or had imagined. Jesus urged people to look beyond their differences and their divisions, to see their similarities, and to show mercy and compassion and care to each other. Jesus urged people to love one another and to appreciate that each and every person is a precious and valuable part of creation and loved by God. Many who heard Jesus preach or heard his message through others were inspired to see their world and other people in new ways. They sought to live as Jesus taught and believed that Jesus would help to change the world and usher in a new way of being, a world in which all people would be free from oppression. But Jesus was not popular with everyone. The political and religious leaders of his country thought that Jesus was a real troublemaker and a problem to be erased. They had him arrested. Jesus was brought before the Roman ruler of Palestine, who decided to punish him severely. Jesus was sentenced to die on a cross. And the next day, Jesus was crucified. On that day, an unimaginable and terrible event occurred for Jesus' followers. On the day of Jesus' crucifixion, a good man of deep religious conviction and concern for others, suffered and died. And God did not intervene. There was no miracle. There was no divine superpower that Jesus had tucked away that he could use to save himself. He did what human beings do when their bodies have endured just too much. He simply died. And when he died, the people who believed in him and in his message, the people who had come to love him, did what people do when a loved one dies. They mourned. They mourned the death of the person they cared for. They cried at the suffering Jesus endured. They were heartbroken by the loss of their leader, their minister, their teacher, their preacher and companion. They felt devastated at the loss of the hopeful future that they believed was going to come about through Jesus' presence and ministry. They grieved the loss of a future with greater justice and freedom and mercy in this world. Like all mourning people, they felt that everything had come crashing down around them. They took Jesus' body down from the cross and placed it in a tomb, like a cave. And to seal the tomb, they rolled a huge stone in front of the entrance. 3 days later, before dawn, 2 of Jesus' followers went to the tomb that held the body of Jesus. But when they arrived, they found that the enormous stone had somehow been rolled away and the tomb was empty. Imagine their shock and their horror and their worry. Although there are many versions of what happened next, each tells us that a person or angel told Jesus' followers that Jesus was not dead. He is not dead, they said. He is risen. And that though he would soon be with his God, he would always be with his followers too. Upon hearing this incredible and miraculous news, Jesus' disciples, his students, experienced the presence of Jesus in their midst. Their friend who had died was not gone. Their deep grief was replaced with incredible joy and renewed hope and purpose. Feeling Jesus among them, his followers went out into the world as Jesus did, telling what they had seen and experienced with Jesus and preaching a message of love so great that it even overcomes death. On Easter Sunday, people of the Christian faith celebrate that Jesus rose from the dead and that others were inspired to preach and teach his message of love. But what do we Unitarian Universalists believe about Jesus at Easter? Well, our Unitarian and Universalist forebears were followers of Jesus' ministry. We recognize Jesus as one of the greatest religious teachers that humankind has known. We join our Christian friends in remembering what Jesus taught. Jesus taught that the power of good is greater and more powerful than the power of fear or hatred. Jesus taught that all people are loved and lovable, that the seed of holiness or goodness is held within each of us. Jesus taught that we should stand up for others and for what is good and right and fair. In language that we so often hear these days, Jesus was the first and ultimate upstander. We Unitarian Universalists remember Jesus 2,000 years after his death because of what he taught. And what he taught endured. Easter also reminds us, all of us, mortal beings, that even when we despair, when we mourn, when we feel heartbroken, when we feel that things are unclear and all feels lost, there is still reason to hold out hope, even when it feels like the world is crashing down around us. So on this and every Easter Sunday, may Jesus' ministry work its magic in our hearts and in our lives. May we join the legions of people who proclaim a message of hope and who answer the call to help others by helping what is good in this world grow and thrive.
Today's offering, in part, is going toward the minister's discretionary fund, which allows the ministry team to offer assistance to members of the congregation in times of crisis or need. The purpose of the congregation is to encourage all who gather here to grow more generous in spirit and in action. We now take an offering that allows us to exercise our generosity of spirit, an offering that will support this congregation and the work we do together. Your gifts and donations are gratefully received. Will the ushers please come forward? This is the story, The Golden Rule, written by Eileen Cooper, illustrated by Gabi Swiatowska. And we want to take a moment to acknowledge special readers that we will have joining us today: Paul Dresner, Farah Shadou, and Klaus Message. A boy and his grandfather stood on a city sidewalk looking up at the words printed on a billboard.
Grandpa, what does that say?
Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. People all over the world call those words the Golden Rule.
What does it mean, and why is it golden?
It means treat other people the way you would like to be treated. It's golden because it's so valuable, and it's a way of life that's so simple, it shines.
The grandfather led the boy to another billboard further down the sidewalk.
Some people put the Golden Rule another way. Do nothing to other people that you would not like having done to you. Either way, it's a very good rule.
Who's it for?
You, me, anyone can practice the Golden Rule.
A rule that's the same for children and grown-ups?
Same rule.
There aren't too many rules like that.
You're right about that.
And it's for people everywhere?
Everywhere. Whatever their religion, people find the idea of the Golden Rule in their holy books.
Christianity says you should love your neighbor as you love yourself. Judaism says what is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow humans.
Islam says, hurt no one so that no one may hurt you. Hinduism says, this is a sum of duty, to do nothing to others which would cause them pain.
Buddhism says, do not do to others what would hurt you. The Shawnee tribe says, do not kill or injure your neighbor, for it is not he or she that you injure yourself.
The boy and his grandfather sat down on a park bench.
So, Grandpa, how can I start to practice the Golden Rule?
You begin by using your imagination.
My imagination?
Mm-hmm. You imagine how someone else feels. For instance, a new child is joining your class at school. How do you think that boy or girl is feeling?
New kids always look scared.
Would you be scared if it was you?
Oh, yes, I'd be scared.
So what would you do to make them feel better?
If someone smiled at me.
So to practice the Golden Rule, you would
Smile at the new kid.
You got it. I bet you can think of other ways that you'd like to be treated and ways you wouldn't want to be treated. How do you feel when you're teased or bullied?
Sad.
Yes.
Mad.
Yes.
Small. I feel small.
Sad, mad, small. Do you like feeling like that?
No.
Neither does anyone else.
The boy thought for a moment about the Golden Rule.
I see. There are lots of things I can do. I should tell the truth because I don't like being lied to. I want people to listen to me, so I should listen to other people. When I'm sick or when I'm tired, sometimes I need help. So I should offer my help to those who need it.
You are getting the idea.
The boy looked at his grandfather.
Practicing the Golden Rule seems like it can be hard.
I said it was simple. I didn't say it would be easy.
Grandpa, the Golden Rule is a very big thing, isn't it?
Very big, and very small, and very old. It's been around for thousands of years.
Thousands of years? Well then, I don't think everyone is practicing it the way they should. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many problems between people and between countries.
You're right. How do you think things would change if everyone lived the golden rule?
I think people would be nicer and kinder. They'd act better toward their family and friends and even strangers.
And what if whole countries lived by the golden rule?
Well, then people wouldn't hurt each other because they don't like being hurt. There wouldn't be any wars.
Oh, wouldn't that be wonderful?
Wonderful, Grandpa.
But you can't make everyone in the world practice the golden rule. There's only one person you can ask to do that.
Me.
Yes, you. It begins with you.
Let's enter into a period of some prayer and meditation. Spirit of life, we rejoice in the wisdom of diverse religions that affirm the golden rule as a guide to how we should treat one another. May we make that rule a part of our own way of being in the world. We rejoice that we have been blessed with families to hold and nurture us as we journey from infancy to adulthood. We rejoice in the good intent that parents bring to the creation of a family. May that intent create homes where children learn and experience love, affirmation, and encouragement. We rejoice that we have been blessed with those who witness to the power of love over indifference and hatred. We remember today all those who witness for justice and peace in places where injustice and violence are everyday realities. We rejoice in their examples. Make us bold to follow in their footsteps. And finally, we rejoice that we have been blessed with this congregation, meeting in worship and service. Together we have shared moments of sadness and sorrow, happiness and joy. We come together today to celebrate the promise of Passover and the good news of Easter. We rejoice in the renewal of hope that this day brings. Make us bold to seek your transforming power in all our tomorrows. So may it always be. Shalom. Blessed be, Insha'Allah. Aho Shanti. Amen. want to do a shout out based on the hymn for the exquisite flower arrangements that Katie Shaw has produced for us once again today for this Easter Sunday. And this too, and grade 3 did the Easter tree. We are surrounded by beauty. All right, one brief little thing, and then we'll have our hymn, and then the instructions about the Easter egg hunt. Okay. In 2016, entrepreneur and author David Kirpin proposed in his book, The Art of People, a platinum rule to guide us in our relations with other people. Now, I had not heard of this before myself, but it says, do unto others as they would want done unto them. In other words, rather than always using ourselves as the standard, practice empathy and imagination to treat other people the way they'd like to be treated. Kirpin quotes Dale Carnegie, who authored the book How to Win Friends and Influence People. Some of you may know that. Carnegie writes, "Personally, I'm very fond of strawberries and cream, but I have found that for some strange reason, fish prefer worms. So when I went fishing, I didn't think about what I wanted. I thought about what they wanted. I didn't bait the hook with strawberries and cream. Rather, I dangled a worm or a grasshopper in front of the fish and said, 'Wouldn't you like to have that?' For people rather than fish, this might mean that although you like people to hold the door open for you when you enter a building, your friend might prefer to open the door herself. So you will respect her preference whenever that situation arises." In the case of both the gold and the platinum rules, the goal is to use our imaginations and try to figure out how to treat other people in ways that will honor their inherent worth and dignity, and respect the particularity of who they are. The golden rule, the platinum rule, let's give them a try and see where they lead us. My guess is they'll take us closer to the place celebrated in our closing hymn, number 95, "There Is More Love Somewhere." Number 95, let us rise in body or spirit as we sing this together. Amen. So now a brief announcement about the Easter egg hunt logistics to go from the sublime to the more sublime. Immediately after the closing words, parents with toddlers through kindergartners, would those parents raise their hands? If you have a toddler or a kindergartner, it's good. You may exit immediately after the closing words that the three ministers will read. Immediately after that, parents with toddlers to kindergartners exit through the worship room doors to the lobby to begin the Easter egg hunt. Other children and parents, would you raise your hands if you're other children and parents? That's good. You're going to leave after the Jazz Ensemble finishes its postlude, which you won't want to miss in any case because it's going to be spectacular. And then I'm going to remain up front here until all the children have left and give a sign to the rest of the congregation that it is safe to move about the cabin. And then we can all leave the worship room. So our closing words of Mark Bellatini.
Go in peace, live simply, gently, at home in yourselves, act justly, speak justly, remember the depth of your own compassion, forget not your power in the days of your powerlessness.
Do not desire to be wealthier than your peers, and stint not your hand of charity. Practice forbearance. Speak the truth or speak not. Take care of yourselves as bodies, for you are a good gift.
Crave peace for all in the world, beginning with yourselves, and go as you go with the dream of that peace alive in your heart.
Toddlers and kindergartners. Okay, I'll go with them. Renton.
Children and parents may now leave. Children and parents, in an orderly fashion, sort of. Jazz Ensemble, great job today. Great job. Choir, great job. I think it's safe for all of us to move toward the doors.